First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my left side palette where I have all of my brushes, and you can see my cursor is over my brushes. And we have our normal fill-in paintbrush, but I'm going to go down here and use my favorite scrunchie brush. That's what it's called. And I'm going to come over to the right hand side and I'm going to click on a pure black. Now normally I wouldn't draw everything with a pure black outline unless I'm doing something for a comic book or a cartoon, but we're just gonna, oh wow, look how big that is. That's not what we want. I'm going to go up here to my size palette and drag it smaller. And if you look in the bottom, it shows that it's going down to size 25, 15. That's good enough for right now. And I'm going to draw myself an apple, just some big, maybe a little bit smaller than that. Let's just draw an apple. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is not about perfection today. This is about exercising your color mixing skills. Let's see. Let's draw a second apple here, a big fat round one. And maybe a third one here in the background. And those big, lumpy looking ones. Alright, so here we've got our 3 apples that we're just gonna notice. I don't even care if they're perfect or lopsided, because in nature fruit is never perfect, just what you see in photographs. And they cheat. Sometimes they're not even real fruit. Alright, so I'm going to go up to my layers dialog up on the left hand side. I'm going to add a layer. Now you'll notice when I add a layer, it goes right above my sketching lines that I made. I'm going to use these little dialogues here on the right hand side, and I'm going to move this layer underneath. That is going to be the layer that I color on. Now for those who are absolutely new, a layer is like a piece of plastic. Clear plastic or glass. You can paint on it and draw on it, and you can see right through it down to the bottom. I'm going to now use that paintbrush I talk about so often. It's this one right up here. And this one is great for filling things in because it doesn't look like a real paintbrush when you use it. I'm going to go over to my color palette and I'm going to click on red. Now, Nene talked about using a mid-toned red. So this red to me seems a little bright. It's a pure red. If we look at our colors, it's R for 255, which means on the red, green, blue spectrum, it is all pure red. And there is no green and there is no blue in it. But I want something not so bright, so I'm going to grab this black indicator that you see moving here in the right area and just scoot it over a little bit so it's not so bright red. And that should be good enough. Maybe a little bit more red. There we go. I am going to work on that second layer, and I'm just going to go around the edge and I'm going to fill it in with my mid-tone red. There we go. Super easy. Now, Seminis' theory, once again, was that you use a lighter color for your highlight and a shade for your low lights. So if I look at my triangle in the palette over here on the right, I can grab a lighter color by sliding over to the left. And now you can see I have a beautiful pink color. I'm going to come back over here to the left hand side and grab my scroungy brush, because we're going to do this in a painterly fashion. And we're going to think about which way the light is coming from. Now, just for example, let's pretend that the light is coming from this direction. So what Nene would have done is he would have just started taking his paint and putting in that light color. There's a little bit on this hip as well. And he would have just started putting in that light color to make his apple look more three-dimensional. Now, I'm going to go and pick my darker color, which I'm going to use the same exact triangle. I'm not going to move our red any at all. And I'm going to come down here and grab one of these darker reds. Seminis would have then put the darker red on this side, where the shadows are. I'm just lightly scribbling that color in. Maybe there's a little extra darkness here in that hip. Just pushing heavily on one side and just lightly scribbling my color into the middle of the apple until there's almost a transition between the light, the middle, and the dark. Here I can go over to the left side and grab one of my smudge round bristle brushes. This might be a blender brush in your program. And I can just come over here and just lightly blend it. Now you'll notice I'm not pushing and scribbling back and forth. I'm just tapping it and going in small little grape areas, just like a little grape that you just pop in your mouth and eat. You're just going to click down and swirl, because that keeps the color kind of localized. You're not smearing it everywhere. Keeps my darks where my darks need to be, keeps my lights where my lights need to be. And Seminis' reason for doing this had a lot to do with the paints that he used at the time. Seminis in the 14 and 1500s, artists had paints that were pigment plus egg yolk, pigments that were pigment plus the white of the egg. He also had oil paints. And so he would work in layers. Maybe he filled it in the middle color and let it dry, and then several days later, or even later that afternoon, started putting in the color. It wasn't always easy to mix everything all at one time. So I can grab a little bit more white, lighter color pink over here in my palette, go back to my scrunchie brush, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glisten on that top of that apple and go just a little bit lighter. Now you need to remember that in nature there's very little pure white out there and very little pure black except at night. So a lot of people are very tempted to grab this pure white and put a nice big chunky white glow on there. Nope, I'm going to come up here, I'm going to grab my undo arrow, click, and it's gone. You're going to have different lighting conditions depending on what your atmosphere and your setting is like. So we'll talk more about highlights and low lights and things like that later. But just for today's practice, just remember there's very little pure white in nature. So we're going to get this really light pink. Just scramble that in a painterly fashion. But we're not going to make a big white blob. And then maybe go down here and grab some more dark and go really close to the edge. And the reason for that is that there's something called bounce light. When you have a surface, let's say here is my table. I'm just making a really quick table. You're going to have a shadow here because of our light source. And you're going to have something called bounce light. And that is light that comes in this direction and bounces off the surface and puts a little bit of edge just on that side. I'm going to grab my blender again. Just softly blend that in there so that you have that just that little tiny edge. And if you have a lot of harsh light, you're going to have just a little bit more bounce light in there. So your apple's going to look something like that. So the other two theories of coloring something in a painterly fashion are going to be the exact opposite. Well, not the exact, well, pretty close to the exact opposite of this. We're going to try filling it in with darks first. I'm going to grab my darker red that we used earlier, something close down in this range, and my big fill-in paintbrush. And if you follow along, we're just going to fill in that apple. And this dark to light theory is really important when it comes to working in oils. Because oils, I'm going to grab my scrunchie brush here. I'm just going to write down here. Oils, you often work dark to light. When you add a light colored paint into the darkness, you can make a lot of mud. So it's very important to be very sparing with your light colors as you go and let the oils dry and add just a little bit at a time. So here we have our darkness, which means that we need to come up here and start adding lighter colors. I'm just going to grab a lighter color and start working in the middle. Because now we're working dark to light. Just gonna scribble that bright red in there and let that darkness stay there. Don't want to cover it all up. But you'll notice what I can do is I can use this red all the way over. Just continue adding my red to my apple, getting a richer red, and then adding a little bit of a lighter red, just going over here, getting that nice pink. Start pulling that pink in. Just maybe it has a hip right here. Don't know. Just a hip maybe right here. Those apples all have hips, you know. And that little bit of bounce light we talked about earlier, just right there on that side. And then I'm going to grab my blender again, my big smudge round, and I'm going to just work in little circles because I don't want to lose my beautiful colors that I've done. I don't want to turn them muddy. We've had the mud discussion before about how the more you work something, sometimes you overwork it. There we go. Look at that apple. It's a nice, dark, sensuous apple, isn't it? That looks pretty good. I'm going to grab some more of this light color and my scrunchie brush, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger and just add some more lightness to this apple. On this side, where the light is coming from, and there we go. Just get a nice bit of shine on that apple, and then get my little highlight. I want a little highlight here, a little highlight here. Oh, that's too strong a white. We don't want that strong a white. No, 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 because there's no pure white in nature. I'm going to grab my smudging brush again and just scrub these around a little bit. There we go. But look how that totally changes how the apple looks because you filled it in differently. You filled it in dark to light. Now we're going to work on our third one, which I'm going to treat the exact opposite. It's going to go all the way light to all the way dark. So we're going to grab one of these lighter color and our solid paintbrush. I'm going to fill in this apple that we've got over here. And this is a lot like working in acrylics, because acrylics, you can layer and layer and layer and layer, putting the pigment in something like matte medium or gel medium. Matte medium and gel medium are clear, and you can just quickly add a little layer of color. If you don't like it, you wipe it off because it dries really fast with just water and air. It's little bits of polymer plastic floating in water, super easy to work with. But you just layer it up. So I'm going to grab a little bit darker, and I'm going to grab my scrunchie brush, and I'm just going to start making this apple darker, just grabbing my pinks, just going layer by layer by layer of colors. I'm not going to be in a giant hurry. I'm just going to scribble that stuff in. Oh, I should put acrylics down here. Acrylics. Alright, so I'm just adding my color, just layering that in. Yep. Gonna grab a little bit darker color. Just start over on this side. Just scribble that stuff in. There's that little hip right there. Oh, and you know, down here it's going to be super dark because that's where the light is not at all. So we need to think about where the light is coming from. Just keep adding our colors. I'm going to grab a little bit more darker red. Just grab something here in the middle of our triangle. Now I want to keep that little bit of light over there because that's where our bounce light is. This is an additive process. We're adding color, not subtracting it. We're not in the middle. Just grabbing that. Go. And going once again darker. And we're just going to keep adding darker color and darker color and darker color. Adding darker color. go even darker, grab some dark color here. Oh, we're getting into that really pretty dark color. Just going to scrunch that on there. Scribble. You'll see I'm not looking for perfection. Perfection is not today's buzzword. Today is just experimenting and doing exercises. And get a little bit darker. Yeah, there's our dark, nice dark color. Just putting that dark color in, just adding it. Little bit by little bit by little bit. I'm going to come over here and get my smudging brush. Could be blender in your program. And just click and just blend these colors together, just little swirls. See what we get here. I'm going to move that little bit of light right over here. Alright, I'm going to grab my scrungy brush again. I'm going to grab me some even darker color. Just going to make this apple really dark right up against this other apple. Yeah, there we go. Gonna add maybe a little bit of shadow, just real quick. A little bit, maybe there's a little hip right there. Maybe there's a hip right there, I don't know, just playing with my apple some. I'm going to grab my scrungy brush, just blend that in a little bit. There we go. And there's that little bit of bounce light left over from the side. Alright. So now you can see 3 different ways that you can color in using a digital platform, but a painterly method. You have original from Seminis, you have a dark to light, and a light to dark. So when you're building your colors up, think about what your end product is going to be and how you would like to color it in.